Well, Hamas has rejected a proposed 2-month ceasefire. Let's first look at this scoop from Axios that came out saying that Israel proposes a 2-month fighting pause in Gaza for release of all hostages. Israel has given Hamas a proposal through Qatari and Egyptian mediators that includes up to 2 months of a pause in the fighting as part of a multi-phase deal that would include the release of all remaining hostages held in Gaza, two Israeli officials said. They said that more than 130 hostages are still being held in Gaza. Israeli officials say several dozen hostages either died on October 7th or in the weeks since then. President Biden's advisor, Brent McGurk, traveled to Egypt on Sunday and will continue to Qatar afterward for talks aimed at making progress in the negotiation to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. Qatari and Egyptian mediators have been trying for weeks to bridge the gaps between the parties in order to make progress towards a deal. U.S. officials told Axios that reaching such an agreement might be the only path that could lead to a ceasefire in Gaza. However, Hamas has rejected this. Hamas has said, no, a ceasefire for 2 months. So we're going to give you back all of your hostages. You're going to give us a break for 2 months where we bring in some humanitarian aid, and then you're going to continue bombarding us and ethnic cleansing us and pushing us towards the Rafah border and talking about displacing us all around the world or to Lebanon and to all of these other Arab nations. No deal. We're not taking that deal. What Hamas has proposed is a complete withdrawal of IDF from Gaza. They want to take back the Gaza Strip. They want the IDF out. They want an end to the current now occupation of IDF. And they said that is what they will agree to. The IDF has come back and said, no deal. We do not want that the idea of Hamas remaining in Gaza is not an option for us. And so basically we're at a stalemate with this release. Now, that is the way to get the hostages back, is a ceasefire. That is clear. Hamas has shown that when they first did the ceasefire, they did release over 100 of the hostages and held on to another 130 hostages. So they've shown, and they're refusing to give the hostages back under any other circumstance other than a ceasefire. So they have figured that out. Hamas has figured that out. They're not going to ease up on that. They understand that there will be continued bombardment of Gaza as soon as Israel gets their hostages back. Personally, I think they should look, I don't think hostages should be happening at all. But from just a strategic, if I'm not going to look at it from a humane perspective of thinking that people shouldn't be held hostage, looking at it from a strategy perspective, I do think that it would be in Hamas's best interest to just release the hostages. Just release all the hostages and then let Israel continue to show who they really are. Because one of the narratives that's been circulating around is, well, if Hamas would just release the hostages, then the bombardment would stop. That is what we've been hearing over the last few months whenever people point out the death and destruction, the women, the children who are being buried alive under the rubble. People say, well, all Hamas has to do is release the hostages. That has never actually been a reality. The IDF admits that. That's why they say a 2-month pause in exchange for all of the hostages. They're not saying just a ceasefire and ending this round of the conflict. They're not saying that at all. They're saying, well, we'll give you 2 months of a break and then we're back at it after you give us back all the hostages. So Hamas knows that that's not a reality, that giving back the hostages won't end the bombardment. IDF has admitted releasing all the hostages will not end the bombardment. It's just public sentiment kind of has this idea in their mind. So the best thing to happen, because the court of public opinion is, I think, very powerful, is for Hamas to release all of these hostages and then show the world what the IDF is really about. And they just will continue their ethnic cleansing campaign. You're not going to stop it anyway, because they clearly are willing to kill their own hostages. They don't care. They're one thing I'll give it to the IDF, they're at least consistent. They kill anything that moves. They don't care if it's a Palestinian or a hostage or an Israeli hostage. They're just killing anybody that moves. They don't seem to prioritize their people over other people. It's just the Hannibal directive. Kill everything. To reach our objective. It's just a very aggressive, forceful military strategy. So Hamas knows this, but I think what they should do is release the hostages and show the world what the IDF is really made of and make the public opinion turn on them even more than it already has by saying, look, they released the hostages and now they have the moral footing, and IDF is still doing what the IDF is doing. That is my personal opinion. However, the IDF might be more willing to now negotiate further now that it was announced that 21 IDF soldiers were killed in action yesterday. Here's a tweet from the IDF saying 21 IDF soldiers were killed in action yesterday, Monday, as they continued to operate against Hamas centers of gravity in southern Gaza. Based on the information available at this stage, the troops were operating in eastern Gaza near Khan Yunis. The forces were operating to remove structures and terrorist infrastructure that posed a threat to the security of Israeli communities. During the activity to remove the threat, at approximately 1600 IST time, it appears that an RPG missile was fired by Hamas terrorists toward a tank, which was securing the force. Now, simultaneously, there was an explosion, which resulted in the collapse of two-story structures, while many troops were either inside or nearby. Following the explosion, commanders operating in the field, along with the rescue teams that arrived at the scene, have been executing a very complex operation to evacuate the casualties and locate the injured. So let me just break this down to what exactly happened is that these IDF soldiers were planting explosives inside of two different buildings that they were going to blow up. That right there, a lot of questions around that. Why were they planting explosives to take down these two buildings? If they were able to go inside of these buildings, then clearly Hamas was not inside them. You know, they've said that the reason why they're tearing down infrastructure, the reason why they're targeting buildings is because they're Hamas headquarters, right? They're trying to go after Hamas. But when they're able to go inside of a building and actually plant explosives to take the building down, which they've done on numerous occasions, there are no combatants in those buildings. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do this. So they're placing explosives throughout these two different two-story buildings. And as they were doing this, a member of Hamas, a militant, fired an RPG, one single RPG, at a tank that then caused a chain reaction where it triggered the explosives to go off early. And the explosives took down the two buildings that the IDF was intending to take down. It just took them down with it. And that's how they all died. That's what happened. Which is horrible and this war needs to end. It's horrible and tragic. There's a lot of people very angry that these IDF soldiers were killed. They're angry at Hamas for killing them. I don't know what you expect when you march into a war zone as a member of the military. If you're going to go and invade somebody else's land and try to occupy it, you're putting your life at risk. You're allowing your country to put your life at risk. And you should really ask your country if it's really, truly worth it, if you're doing the right thing. And in this case, I sympathize that the Israelis need to have security in the region, but I also think that the Palestinians need to have land and free and equal rights. They need to have freedom. They cannot continue to live like this, and there has to be a solution. And that solution is either the Palestinians get a true state with true sovereignty, not the fake sovereignty that they've tried to offer in the past of, oh yeah, we'll give you this land, but we control the air, the water, the wells, the telecommunications, the ports, the airspace, the security. You can't have a military. We're even going to come in and patrol your area every so often and shoot at you sometimes, but you're a sovereign nation. That's not a sovereign nation. They either need to be given sovereignty or they need to just open up the borders and say everybody lives here on the Holy Land, Muslims and Jews, and bring back the Christians while you're at it. The Holy Land is for all three. And say it's Canaan, the land of Canaan, or call it the Holy Land or whatever you want to call it, and give everybody equal rights. They got one of the two options, but this option of continuing to oppress people or ethnically cleanse them, not good. Also want to point, this is a terrible story. An American teen was killed in the West Bank by a settler and an IDF soldier, an off-duty IDF soldier. This, I cannot believe, is not headline news for every single outlet out there, but NBC News did at least put this out. A Louisiana teen traveled to the West Bank to learn about his roots, and he was shot dead. So Tawfiq Jabbar, he was born and raised in Louisiana. His parents are from Palestine. He's 17 years old. He went back to Palestine to see his homeland, to see his roots, and which many Palestinians do. And apparently he came across a very violent settler, and the settler shot at the teen, the American teen, and then an off-duty IDF soldier joined in, who was in uniform, joined in and continued shooting at the teen and others that were with him. Now, the IDF has admitted this, saying, we know that a civilian and an off-duty IDF soldier shot and killed these people, but they're investigating to see if the civilian was one of the aggressive settlers, which likely was, who's been causing a lot of death and destruction in the West Bank. So the fighting is not just going on in Gaza, it's happening also in the West Bank. The settlers have taken advantage of all of this, and they're being very aggressive towards the Palestinian people. So an American teen was shot and killed in the West Bank. I mean, this is somebody born and raised in the United States. Goes back there, and now they're saying, well, he was throwing rocks. And the dad said, so what, even if he was? He says, I don't know if he was. I don't think he was. But even if he was, so what? What does a rock do to you when you're hundreds of meters away? You're 100 meters away, and you're throwing a rock that doesn't even hit a tank or a truck or anybody. And, what's happened is these Palestinians want the Israelis off their land. The West Bank is technically theirs. Gaza is technically theirs. And they've got IDF and settlers all over the West Bank who are not supposed to be there. And so there is violent tension between the groups. Sometimes the Palestinians get violent and say, get off my land. You're not supposed to be here. You've invaded. You have to get off. And they're met with very, very heavy retaliation for that. So if they throw a rock, they get shot in the head. And that's what happened to the 17-year-old kid. He was shot in the head. Just absolutely terrible, terrible stuff going on in the West Bank and in Gaza.